Hi everyone, welcome to Be an Artist. I'm here with Claire Zakiewicz today, and she's a painter and a performance artist. We recently met when she organized a triple bill at the 100 Years Gallery where I was dancing for Gwen Kassenaar. Hi Claire, thank you so much for coming.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
So you're one of the people that I barely know actually, because up to now everybody on the podcast has been somebody that I've known for years. So they were like my guinea pigs. You're the first person I've just met, and
Yeah.
I've met because you've done this amazing performance painting piece where you painted on the floor. It was very large scale painting, but I don't know any about your history. Do you want to just catch us up a little bit about how you got started in art and how you developed your style?
Sure. So I don't know where to begin really. So how I got started in art, and well, I have always been making art. So at school, I was pretty much like told by everybody that I was an artist, more than the other way around, like more than me saying that I was an artist. So yeah, I suppose like from childhood, it was mostly I really liked drawing and painting, but also music and dance. So I always thought that they had to be separate until I got a bit older, and I went to art school. And even at art school, I had a teacher who said that we shouldn't listen to music when we're painting because it influences us too much. And I think that partly was like, it kind of provoked me to think, how does it influence me? And I think maybe that took me down a journey of like thinking about how music influences, can possibly influence, or like different art forms can combine and influence each other in interest. Like I was interested in how they did that. And so I used to play the saxophone, and I wanted to improvise. Like I wanted to be an improviser with the saxophone, and that took some time and like some help from other musicians. And I started doing that, I think, when I was about 17, and I played in bars in London, and then later on in Cambridge with like just in bars and busking, and it was mostly jazz back then. And then I started working more with contemporary classical composers, and I liked that. I liked that scene because it was a bit more philosophical. And then I eventually did I did printmaking, and I was making like multimedia visual artwork. And then I did a master's in the physical and metaphorical relationships between sound and drawing. So I was reading a lot then, and it was more philosophy and psychology alongside making work as well, like alongside a practice of kind of, but it was more research. So I was doing lots of scribbles, and that was when I started to draw without looking and just practice, just listening. And so I started like closing my eyes or wearing a blindfold. And then I went to New York about 7 years ago, and I didn't know anybody there. So it was a residency, and I was able to just really focus on my own practice without, at the beginning, any other collaborating. And I, after really thinking about it for a few days in my studio alone, I just thought I really want to develop my painting. So to take a little bit of a break from performance, and just focus on paint. Well, first of all, drawing, and then I wanted to translate what I was doing with drawing into painting. And so I was there for about 7 years in New York, and then I started to collaborate with people, and collaborate with musicians mostly, and dancers. I actually still work with a dancer who is now in Buenos Aires, And we did performances together in New York and in Venice as well. And I worked with another dancer in Venice, so making paintings together. So we would do contact improvisation. And I worked I did a residency in a dance space in New York as well, called Bill Young's Dance Studio. So I worked with some dancers there, and I just kind of experimented with different ways of working with dancers. So sometimes drawing them like from direct observation, a little bit more like Gwen, where the performance with you, where she was like drawing your movements. But also I've done performances where the dancers have, like, with contact improvisation, they've kind of like moved me. So, and like I'm blindfolded, so I'm like a paintbrush and they just kind of like push me around. And so I've done that with dancers. And then I got stuck in London when it was the pandemic last year, at the beginning of last year. I came back to renew my visa, and then the pandemic happened, and they're not allowing visa holders to go back into America. So I've just been, that's when I started to plan events at 100 Years Gallery in Hoxton, where I met you.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I didn't know. I thought you like based in London for like a really long time. So
well, I was until, because I grew up in London, so
yeah.
I'm from London. So it's like I've come back home. Yeah.
So the studio that you have you just had it since you came back from New York?
No, actually, I've had the studios for 13 years. So when I went to New York, I let friends use it and things. Nice. So yeah.
Do you feel like the art scene is different in New York, like the vibe around improvised art, or can you compare it at all? Or
it is different, definitely, like little differences. I think improvised music is great in London and New York as well, but I feel like maybe I'm not really qualified to say, but I think that there seems to be more improvised music in London. Like the scene that's in 100 Years Gallery is really super strong, and like the London Improvised Orchestra is really strong.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot of similarities. There are people who are working with sound and dance and painting, I think, in both cities.
I actually didn't notice that you were painting with a blindfold on until about 10 minutes into your set.
Oh, really?
So even though I had really good view at you, but somehow it never registered because you were moving so, like you were moving so naturally around on the floor. I didn't notice, like it wasn't like something that jumped out. So I was just watching your hands and feet move across the painting. I didn't notice you put the blindfold on. I don't know how I missed that. But
that's interesting.
Because I think your head was so much part of your hands, like your head moved kind of with your body and with your hands, that I just naturally assumed that you would look at what you're drawing. And then it struck me like halfway through. I think it struck me when you missed one of the pots. Said, oh my God, she's wearing a blindfold. And Lars was sitting next to me. I'm like, Lars, she's got a blindfold on. And he's like, yeah, she put it on in the beginning. That was like such an amazing moment, because when something's there but you don't see it, and then like when you have this huge revelation, it makes it so much more like impactful.
That's really interesting that you should say that, and you're a dancer, because maybe that's just because I've done it so many times. Like I often just put a blindfold on, even when I'm just by myself in the studio working, because the mark making is different. And I find it actually like so much easier to just respond, just get into the present moment and respond to the sounds and the music. So I actually prefer it. If I don't have a blindfold on, then I have so many, it becomes a bit confusing, like what I should respond to. So I prefer to, it just depends what kind of mark making that I'm doing. But I think maybe if I'd never done it before, then, or if I'd only done it a couple of times, it might be quite different. Like my movements would probably be a bit different.
And do you always work on the floor, or do you also work on like upright, like walls, or?
Yeah, I work upright as well on walls, and recently I've been preferring to work on a wall, but at the event there was already something on the wall, and I also wasn't really sure if I was able to knock any like nails into the wall to like hold it up until the last minute. So I just planned. It was just easier to do it on the floor, but I'm just kind of like quite mindful about my posture at the moment. Like I've been doing a lot of work on the floor, and after a while, you know, it's just like difficult to just make sure that it's not too much, because I mean it was like 2 sets of 20 minutes, and if I'm like bending down like that, I just end up, I feel like it's not very healthy. So I prefer I prefer if it's like more upright. Yeah, the movements are easier if I'm just
Yeah, obviously, it's bending down. Even with like contemporary dance, you do a lot of floor work sometimes, but you feel it in your shoulders, and you have to do a lot of strengthening for your back as well, because you
yes,
kind of, you kind of in this hovering position.
yeah,
You can't really put your
exactly.
weight onto your paintbrush, you have to. But that was really impressive. Did you always do this mark? Is it mark making that is what you do? It's like I don't know the term mark making, what exactly it means. Is there?
Well, mark making just means like making marks.
Mm.
But I suppose what you mean is like I suppose like the paintings that, like, so I did this one. This was the one that I did for the event, and it really is just like marks that are made like kind of like an action painting.
Yeah.
And so the kind of essence of the painting is like the mark, like the energy in the marks, but it's not, that's like not the only way that I make work. Like the one that's hanging on the other side has got a lot more layers, and there's like different ways of making the marks. Like the blue, for example, I did that with my eyes open, and like it was more kind of deliberate brushstrokes. And I used to do printmaking, which is a completely different process. I did like a lot of monoprint, and I used photographs, and I was using pen to like a bit like how maybe like Tracy Emin's monoprints, and that was completely different. And then my works, I kind of did a combination of monoprint and painting, and the works would be quite sort of very representational and lots of portraits and things. So they were really different. But I've sort of been working in this way. I guess it was really when I started to look at different ways of working with sound and movement, and I found that this sort of kind of I suppose people would call it abstract expressionist, or this sort of like mark making that is more I'm looking at the one that I've got one over there that's like almost the same. That's why I'm like looking in that direction. Yeah. So I haven't always done it, and I do work in other ways. I also draw from observation quite often as well, just as a practice. So like most days I draw like trees and people. I do lots of portraits just to kind of just practice different ways of drawing and painting.
Was the comment your teacher made that you shouldn't listen to music whilst drawing? Was it before you started saxophone or was it after?
It was after I started playing the saxophone, yeah. And I come from a family where we played music all the time. Like my brother's a DJ, and then I was a DJ as well. Oh, I guess I still am, but I used to DJ all the time. And so, and you know, my friends at art school were a lot of musicians, and we just loved music. So we would just always be playing music in the studio really loud. But she just mentioned that actually it really influences the work, and maybe we should try painting or making artwork without music, which is probably in some ways a good idea. And actually I don't listen to music randomly so much when I paint anymore. I pick music really quite specific kind of music that I'm going to work with. I do sometimes just play it in the background, but I often work without any music these days. And then if I,
Sorry.
no,
And I was just wanted to ask, like, do you think you do more like live performance painting, or do you do more studio painting, or like how do you keep the balance between those two?
I definitely do more studio painting. Yeah. I go through phases. If I have somebody who's really willing to work with me, then I sometimes just practice lots of different ways of performing. You know, if they want to practice with me, then I feel quite happy about that, and I'm willing to do it. Like there was, I think in 2018, I was doing a residency in New York in a place called the Mothership, and that's where I met Mariana, who's a dancer, and there was also a girl called Siv, who is well, when I was first introduced to her, she was introduced as a shaman, but then she didn't want to be known as a shaman anymore. So, but we still called her a shaman. But she worked with like energy and sort of healing, and she was also an actor, and she's amazing at improvising. So I started just like playing around with this idea of her painting my paintings for me, but I would give instructions and I would play music. And she would improvise, but really kind of like respond to the music. She would really get into a kind of trance sort of state, and it was amazing. So if I've got people around me, this was a live work studio space. So I was living in the studio. I had like a loft bed, and we would just work together every day. But we only performed to an audience. I mean, it was quite often, like every 2 weeks or so. So we did quite a few performances, and some of them were more elaborate than others. Like I think the most elaborate one was for Greenpoint Open Studios. I think that was in 2018, and we had a girl who was playing cello and singing, and a guy on the saxophone, and a guy on like objects doing percussion with like just objects, and we had dancer, and then I was painting, and there was quite a big audience as well. Yeah, we also just kind of filmed, or we would put it on Facebook Live or Instagram Live in the studio. We recorded everything, but we were doing it so much that now I've got all this material. I needed to have like a global pandemic to like even begin to stop and actually go through the material, and I haven't even got around to like, I just got all this recording which I need to go
That's
through.
crazy.
But
That must be hard drive after hard drive.
yeah, I know, I've got a lot.
That's such a great documentation to have, though. I mean, I
Yeah.
only started filming everything since this pandemic. It needed a pandemic for me to actually buy a laptop and act like I need to document things.
Yeah, it's good to document things.
Have you always been curating and producing? Because for example, the gig at the 100 Years Gallery was completely yours, right? It's just your night, you organize it. Have you been doing that a lot by yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I go through phases, but yeah, I used to curate exhibitions when I was in my 20s. I used to do it quite a lot. And not so much, I didn't actually organize any exhibitions for the 7 years that I was in New York. I think it was something that came about when I came back to London, and I just felt like I wanted to reconnect with my community in London and like meet new artists. And actually the event at 100 Years Gallery, initially it was organized by me and Sophie Sater. I met Sophie Sater in New York, and she was doing the same thing as me, kind of living between London and New York and flying back and forth, because she actually in Boston, she was teaching at Boston University and a little bit in Harvard and in Cambridge University as well. She teaches poetry and performance art. And we were both doing a performance of a different artist, Carol Szymanski, I think is her name. We were, we were both performing in Carol's performance. And that was just before the pandemic. And we both happened to be in London when the pandemic started, and she was also on a visa, so she wasn't able to go back. She was able to teach remotely, and so we were both in London, and so we wrote a proposal to various different galleries and spaces to ask if we could do an event or have an exhibition or something. And I knew Graham from 100 Years Gallery from about 10 or 12 years ago, when I used to perform at the Foundry. And so I sent him an email, and he was up for us putting together an event. So I actually did one with her in June, and it was a bit different. It was more performance art rather than performance painting. It was a bit, it was just a bit different. There was, it was also video art. So Sophie Sater did a performance with a video. And I also had a friend of mine called Libby Heaney, whose work is, she was a scientist before she became an artist. So her work is about quantum computing and AI. And so she showed a video piece. So it was really different. But then Sophie's so busy with teaching, so she wasn't able to organize the second one. And because my work is performance painting, I thought I'd invite Gwen, and we would focus just on that theme for and I think it works really well for the space.
It was really cool because it was 3 sets. So I forgot who's the guy who did the piece upstairs?
Gerald Curtis.
Yeah. So and then two sets downstairs, but it was both movement and painting, but so different. So it was really, really interesting. I think also the audience told me, like, because I sat down to watch your piece, and I think it was so nice because everything kind of moved, but completely different at like different ends of the spectrum. Like, yeah, it was.
It worked really well, I think, because Gwen has been she's been working with musicians and with you, the dancer, for a really long time, and she's developed things in her own way. So I think it worked really well. And Gerald as well, doing his thing upstairs. Again, it was quite different, and it was, I was really happy with it.
Yeah, I was really excited to be part of it. What inspires you other than music? Like, what do you do
for inspiration? I read quite a bit, and I think the master's that I did that was research based, it was looking at relationships between sound and drawing. I got really interested in psychology and also brain science, and philosophy and things related to that. So today, for example, I started listening to an audiobook because I was driving. I drove a friend to the airport, and I've only been listening, it was like an hour. I'll just tell you what it was called. It was good. I'm going to finish it. It's called Strange Tools, and Art and Human Nature.
Okay.
And it has a scribbly kind of scribble. Can you see that? A little bit like one of mine. So yeah, it was really interesting actually. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks and I read quite a bit, particularly art and science, because I think that, I don't know, it's a really interesting time for science and art actually. So I think that I get quite excited about what's happening and what's going to happen in the future with artificial intelligence and with human beings. Like I know sometimes I get scared as well. I don't know if I'm not completely like positive about how the future is going to be, but I think it's really interesting and exciting. And yeah, I don't know. It's a way of escaping as well in some ways. During the pandemic, when I had to isolate quite a bit. I was by myself, which in some ways it was really good because I was able to really focus on my work, and yeah, it's just sort of escaping into art and science books and thinking about things that are, I don't know, things that are perhaps not happening right now, but could be, or I don't know, just sort of bigger things, not just sort of everyday mundane things. I can go off into space a little bit. But
sometimes bad things bring out great creativity in art. Like I think the biggest burst in Europe that I remember from like my own research was after the First World War, during the avant-garde period, because there was so much creativity bursting out of every corner because people just had a war after them and lost everything, and yeah, it was just crazy. It was like, I think, musicians, artists, writers all together, the cafe culture in Paris, so much philosophy also happened at that point, so many paintings. So let's see what happens after this pandemic, because I think a lot of artists just have been expanding the art.
Definitely, I think it could be a really good time, and especially as people have gone so kind of like into their own heads, because we've been having, a lot of people have been so isolated, or at least have just been forced to be in small communities. And
do you exhibit your work? Do you
exhibit? Do I exhibit it? Sometimes I do. I'm hoping that I have an exhibition this year at Hoxton 253. That's another one that I hoping to have with Sophie Sater. So yeah, I was supposed to have an exhibition in Venice, but then because of the pandemic, that's been postponed, but it might happen. I've exhibited in Venice quite a few times, I think about 5 times. So I have some good friends over there, and I have people I work with as well. There's a photographer who I work with and a dancer. So I've been just waiting to get back out there. Yeah.
Are we speaking about the Biennale in Venice, or just?
No, I mean, I have the exhibitions that I've done. I've always like timed them so that they are during the Biennale, and the last one I did was in the first month of the Biennale, so that was really exciting because you've just got everybody there, so many great exhibits, and all the art world is there, and so it was really exciting. So that was in 2019. But but it wasn't actually part of the Biennale. It was an offsite project. Yeah.
All right.
So it was in a little gallery space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Venice is an amazing city.
Yeah.
Do you teach at
Huh?
all? Do you teach?
No, I have taught. I mean, when I was in my 20s, I taught English as a foreign language. I thought that was it was a good idea because I really like traveling, and being from London, so many of my friends when I was a teenager couldn't speak English, so I was very good at, like, you know, making myself understood and like using, you know, gestures. So that it was a good job. I had it for like, I worked for 10 years as an English teacher. But what I learned from that was it's really like, it's, even if I'm only teaching for like a couple of hours, it takes up so much headspace, and students, you know, they need to kind of like, they need their teachers to kind of, you know, they're almost like counselors. And I just found that it consumed so much of my energy that I found it really difficult to actually make art, even when I was part-time. And also you have to kind of commit yourself to an entire term or semester or an entire year. Otherwise, you're kind of letting the students down. So when I stopped, I was actually made redundant, which was when they were doing the cuts, when they were like, because I worked for a community college. And it was the best thing that happened to me, actually. I like worked out a different way to make money. And I kind of promised myself that I wouldn't teach again, just because I just didn't find it very compatible with having enough energy to make my own work. But I have taught kind of like one-off courses here and there, and I'm actually I've signed up to be on a panel discussion at London Metropolitan University. I think that's coming up quite soon. So like here and there, I'll like I don't mind doing some work, you know, at universities or colleges, but I don't want to sign up for the whole year because I just like, I don't want to have that kind of commitment.
When it comes to the colors you choose, do you have a particular color spectrum that you always use, or do you kind of have themes and then select colors that kind of represent the theme that you have in your head, or is it random?
It's kind of like all of those. So for the event that we did together, I chose colors that were sort of like traditional colors for writing. So I used like black. It was basically black, blue, and red, because I was using, it was actually really good quality watercolor paint, but it was similar to ink. And so I wanted it to be a little bit like calligraphy or like automatic writing. But then I also chose some other colors that were the markers, and I chose like fluorescent colors because I wanted them to have sort of like an extra kind of a bit more life to them, because I knew that the music was going to be really loud, and so there's like fluorescent. I wanted pink as well. I like using pink. I like kind of like beginning to just want to use quite feminine colors. So yeah, and fluorescent yellow. I just wanted something that was sort of, yeah, just fluorescent. So that's why I chose these colors. I was also, last year I made loads of paintings that were blue, because I've got big windows in my flat, and during the pandemic, when I was isolated, I just wanted to stare out the window, really. So I was like painting the sky. So I also did a residency that was in Ulva, that was by the beach, and so I was drawing the sea, painting the sea, and it was quite meditative. So I've got loads of paintings that are like this the sky and the sea. That one is one of them. So yeah, lots of blue. And I also went through a long phase for years of picking colours randomly and finding different ways of picking colours randomly. And I wanted to get away from the colours that I would normally pick. And sometimes I asked friends to pick colours for me, and just so that other people could, so just to introduce different colours into my colour palette. And then choose the colours blind without looking.
Yeah, so when you, for example, in the performance piece in the 100 Years Gallery, you didn't know which color you're painting with, or was there a way of you knowing?
Most of the time I didn't know.
Mhm.
But there were moments where, because I could see a little bit underneath my blindfold. And so there were a couple of moments. I mean, on the whole, I was aiming to be completely blind and just focused on the music without anything else going on. But there are moments where I kind of get caught up in some sort of thinking or some kind of like distraction by like what I could see underneath my blindfold. And I think I'm also I've done acting classes that I use kind of some of the methods. So I have in my mind a kind of character that I'm playing when I was doing these drawings, and a kind of purpose and a kind of need that is kind of like pushing me to take certain actions. So there was one moment where I took the lid off a marker and it wasn't the color that I wanted, and so I kind of chucked it away and I picked out another marker. And so and so I did actually. I wanted pink because there are moments where I feel like the music is kind of calling for a particular color, and so that did happen. But I kind of was aware that it was. I allow myself to have moments where I pick out a color that I want.
Yeah, interesting. And how do you come up with concepts? Do you do that at all? Do you sit and think, I want to express this today, or do you not? Do you just go with the flow?
Sometimes, sometimes I think I've just been influenced by different like movement classes and acting classes, where like in a movement class, for example, they might say like move like an elephant today, or like move like the wind or something. And so I do pick up that so there are times when I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do it often enough. Sometimes I forget about these ideas and I'm like, and then I remember and I'm like, that's a good idea. Yeah.
No, it's really interesting for me because Wynton Marsalis once said, "Music is the art of the invisible." So I'm always think it's really cool when artists use music for their art, because I feel like they're making the music visible through their paint.
Yeah.
How many paintings do you think you've done in your life? Like thousands. Do you keep them all?
Oh my gosh, I've got so many. A lot of my paintings are double-sided because because it's like so much about the process. I run out of paper or canvas, and I run out of storage. So I mean, almost all of my paintings are double-sided.
Wow.
So,
Do you keep it in storage though? Like, do you have storage space, or is it just studios, or like how can
I
I imagine
do.
that?
I do. I've got quite a lot of storage space.
Wow.
Yeah. Got a bit too much. On the back of this painting is one of my favorite paintings, actually.
Mhm.
The back of this blue one is I prefer it to the front. It's just that this blue one isn't finished, so I'm working on it at the moment, and then I might turn it around again.
That's so cool. So if somebody gets a painting, they kind of get two paintings because they can they can turn it around and like have more art.
Yeah. Like the one that I gave you. It's
Yeah.
got two sides. So, yeah. Yeah.
I really like how it feels. It
Mm.
almost feels like it could be a dress, like a leather dress.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got a kind it does make it kind of like a fabric.
And is this part of a big painting that you chopped up?
Yeah. That is that's part of a painting which I did around a similar time to I have some paintings over here in my studio which I did about quite a few years ago. And I was working with black ink and I was doing one stroke for each breath. So it was very meditative. And they're called my breath drawings. And with the one that you have, I turned it upside down afterwards and I did it again. And I quite liked that because it kind of makes a sort of motif like a sound wave.
Mm-hmm.
And then the original one was quite big. It's like you see these ones over here.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can move this so that it's a bit closer. Can you see?
The black ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see them.
So they were really big, the original one. And then I would print them to decide what like if I want to add another layer. And so I printed it and then I would paint it with the transparent gesso and then work over the top and work out like other layers. And so that's how that one was done.
Yeah, that's really cool. Because I can see there's some pen drawings as well. Or maybe not. Is it pen?
Yeah.
Biro?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
and then there's
It was
a little
actually
thing.
pastel. Yeah.
I
That
like
was
that.
a bit.
It's like a little jellyfish.
Yeah.
I always see animals in people's paintings. So funny because when Gwen draws, sometimes we did a few rehearsals for the mural, and every time I saw rabbits, like a seal, like, and she's like, oh, it's very interesting that you see that. I always find animals in everybody's painting. It's like
Yeah, that's really interesting.
my subconscious mind just wants there to be animal. I love animals.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
um, if you look at like your life work, what do you want to leave behind?
Oh, say that again.
If you like look at your life's work, what is kind of the message you want to leave behind?
Oh my gosh, when I look at my work, what's the
Yeah.
message I want to leave behind? When I look at my life's work, the message. That's a really, really difficult question. I think I don't think I can really answer that. I don't think I can give an answer that would be like the right answer.
Mm.
I think maybe I would give a different answer today than I would give like next year, for example.
Okay.
Because I think, I don't know, I would really like to contribute to the development of culture and the development of art. And I kind of feel like to do that, I like to keep my work really experimental. So I like to keep learning and keep developing and pushing things and not necessarily really know what I'm going to be doing next. I like finding new things to explore. So, but I feel really, I feel good when people say that they're inspired to like, I felt really happy after the performance. Somebody said that they were going to go and do exactly what I did. I was like, hey. So they were going to make a painting in exactly the same way. Oh yeah. What was the question? What was the message that I would like to leave behind? Well, I think that art is really important, and I hope that we continue to be creative and maybe be more creative wherever we go in the future. I think that's why my work is really mostly focused on exploring our creativity as human beings. So it's about creativity in a way. I think.
That's really cool. Yeah, I get the sense that your comfort zone starts at the unknown.
Yeah, yeah. I don't feel comfortable when I'm doing the same thing all the time. When I get too comfortable, then I get uncomfortable in a funny kind of way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. I don't even have anything left to ask. Oh, I keep on my laptop. You're on top of moving boxes that I stacked up.
So that you are too.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I think everyone puts their laptop like stacked on books now or boxes.
Yeah. Amazing. Is there anything else you want to add?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think that it's really great that you're doing these. Like I often when I'm in my studio, I spend half my time kind of making art, and then the other half the time cleaning and tidying up after I've made it. And when I'm kind of cleaning and tidying up and sorting things out, I love having artist discussions on, and I find them really, yeah. So I've been listening to your other talks and really enjoying them. So
Thank you.
I think it's really good that you're doing this.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm gonna link all of your info in the description box so people can actually find you and check you out.
Great.
And
Thank you so much.
thank you.